The Lord has been good, and it's good that we are alive, and none of us was caught up. I don't see anybody in bandages, nobody injured here, so we also thank God for that. We don't take these things for granted. Well, this morning, this past Wednesday, June the 25th, marked the first anniversary of the last year's Gen Z's protest, where many people lost their lives. Others were wounded and many disappeared. In fact, they say that about 60 people lost their lives. 9 are still not accounted for, disappeared, maybe abducted by the police. And nothing has been done for the families who lost their loved ones, who are still crying for justice and just to know what has happened and what the government is doing, thinking about their people. So there's been a lot that has happened. This past week I was watching JKA Live as Jeff Koinange was interviewing 3 of the survivors of the last year's Gen Z protest, young men who were shot or culprits of police bullets. One had this leg amputated, the other was still walking crutches, one still had a bullet lodged in his body. But there were also the fathers of the 2, there were 2 dads there, and really my heart really was really wrenched as I heard their stories. The father of Rex Masai, who was I think the first one to be shot last year before the protest began, but also the father of one Shakil in Kitengela, who just gave an harrowing story of how he left Kitengela and came all the way to the city mortuary. Something just starting in his heart that he goes to city mortuary after he discovered that his son was missing. And as he gets there, he finds the body of his son drenched in blood. In fact, it was very difficult even to identify his son. And I can imagine the pain of a father having lost their son in that way. Just the other week, I think 2 weeks ago, before that, there was the man, the father who traveled all the way from Homa Bay, coming with the title deed, hoping that he will leave that in the police to get bail for his son, who was murdered in the police cells. So this man came with a title deed and went back with a death certificate, having lost his son. And then we remember the hawker that was shot, Boniface Kariuki, that was shot by police, even as he was hawking masks in the midst of the protest just before the Wednesday protest, just the other week. And so a lot has been happening in this country. And the other day, Citizen TV had carried their news coverage and titled it Wounds of June. And so today I just want to focus us on the wounds of June. I know last week we talked about further wounds, but I want to talk about the wounds of June. There are many wounded. Some may be physically wounded, many more are emotionally wounded just as a result of the things that have happened. Somebody was telling us that we are living in a country, an angry country. People are angry, and they are hurting, and they are wounded in many ways, in more than one way. People are wounded. And so as we focus our service this morning, we want to just remember that. We want to pray that the Lord will continue to comfort us. We want to cry out for justice for those that are still seeking for justice. And I think that's the least that the government can do is to pay, is to compensate those who have lost their lives. But even with that, those lives can never come back to life. Young lives that have been cut short, people that had ambitions, people that I think the father of Rex Masai was saying that his passport is still lying at the immigration office. He was supposed to be flying out to Canada to go and seek for a better life out there, looking, and yet was shot in that process. And there are many. You can imagine the plans that some of those parents had. I remember the father of that Ojuang, the only child. So you can imagine the hopes, the aspirations that they had for their son, and just for them. And so there's a lot that has happened, and we just don't want to turn our eyes, ignore what is happening. But we want to stand with those that are in this particular moment standing and crying out for justice in one way or another. I recently watched a very, very interesting movie. In fact, there's a movie I recommend for all of you to watch. It's called The Ghosts of Mississippi. And in this movie, there's a widow. it's a movie about one, it's a true story, a movie about one guy called by the name Medgar Evers. Now, Medgar Evers was a black activist, and in 1963, as he's driving home, pulling up in his home in the driveway, as he's there and he's coming out of his car, there is a white guy, I think belongs to the Ku Klux Klan. This guy aims his gun at him, and the wife is inside the house, and the 3 children, young children, waiting, looking forward for daddy coming home. And as they hear the car drive up the driveway, they're excited, and as they are excited, they hear a gunshot. And as they come out, they find that their father, man, has been shot by this white extremist guy. And he dies in the hands of his wife, fully blooded, and the kids come and they see the blood in the driveway. And that's how the man dies. The case appears before the courts, and the man that was accused to have shot him is acquitted, and the case ends. But many years later, this happened in 1963, but around 1989, the widow of this guy, Medgar Evers, by the name Miley, and Whoopi Goldberg is who acts as a wife. And she decides that she has now collected enough evidence to still pursue the case. And they try to see if that case can be revived. I think there's an amendment in the American Constitution that they lean on. And nobody wants to handle this case. Again, remember, it's in America where the white and the black is still a big issue. And nobody is ready to take up this case, except for a young prosecutor by the name Bobby Delota, who decides to finally take up the case. Incidentally, this guy is married to the daughter of the judge who acquitted the man who had shot Medgar Evers. And so as the case is revived almost 30 years later, this young prosecutor takes into the case. In fact, he goes through so much hatred, so much opposition. Even his own wife leaves him. The wife is the daughter of the judge who had acquitted the guy who killed this Medgar Evers. But eventually, after fighting through and going to the court and applying for a retrial, they finally win the case. This is over 30 years later. They win the case, and the widow, gets justice. And listen to what this prosecutor says, this lawyer who represents this widow says. He says, justice has often been described as the soothing balm to the wounds inflicted on society, But when there is no justice, those wounds can never be cleansed. Those wounds can never be healed. When there is no justice, those wounds can never be cleansed. Those wounds can never be healed. Is it ever too late to do the right thing for the sake of the justice and for the hope of us as a civilized society? Those wounds of June can only be healed by justice. Justice, as we sing in our national anthem, be our shield and defender. And unfortunately, in this nation, there's been a lot of injustices. Not just now, but even in the past, there's been a lot of injustices. When the police, the office of the Director of Public Prosecution, and sometimes the judiciary don't do their job well. When justice is auctioned to the highest bidder, how can justice be our shield and our defender? Who will give those grieving mothers that wanted to go and lay wreath to where their children were killed? Who will give them justice? Who will give the father of Ojwang justice? Who will give that hawker that was shot? I don't know if he has survived or he's still alive. Who will give these people justice? Who will give those young men that I saw who are now can't even afford to pay for their medical bills and to get to have their one of them to have the bullet that is lodged in his body removed? Who will stand for them? So in the quest of justice, and why are we crying out for justice? Because as this prosecutor said, justice is the only thing that can heal some of those wounds. When justice is done or is seen to be done, then there's hope for all of us. And I think we still have hope that the only arm of the government that still gives us some glimmer of hope is the judiciary. The executive and the parliament have let us down, but at least there's still some hope in the judiciary, thank God. We are still sure that we can go to the courts and get at least some justice. And our prayer is that even in the midst of all that is happening now, many will find justice in our courts. However long it takes, just like for the widow of Medgar Evers, 30 years later, that justice, they will find justice. And so today, as we look at this important subject of justice, as we talk about the wounds of June, as we remember that justice is the only soothing balm that can heal these wounds, let's focus and turn our hearts to what does the Bible say about justice? What does the Bible say about justice? Yeah, I found it very interesting that our God is a God of justice. Righteousness and justice seem to go hand in hand. In Micah chapter 6 and verse 8 says, He has told you, O man, what is good? What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? Micah 6 and verse 8. In Psalm 33 and verse 5, he says, He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord. Psalms 33 and verse 5. Psalms 82 and verse 3 says, Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Psalms 82 and verse 3. Many of these people that I see them, they're not well off, they're not powerful. And sometimes maybe that's why they cannot find justice. You know, when the MP was shot, things moved very fast, and now already there's a court case happening. And hopefully the family will find justice and know who killed their father. But for these poor people, for these young Gen Zs, for these guys who are nobodies, will they ever find justice? Psalms 106 and verse 3 says, Blessed are they who observe justice, who do righteousness at all times. And Proverbs 21 and verse 3 says, To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. Listen to this, Proverbs 21 and verse 3. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. Proverbs 21 and verse 15 says, When justice is done, it's a joy to the righteous, but terror to the evil doers. And that's our prayer. That as justice is being dispensed, it shall be a joy to the righteous, but a terror to the evil doers. Even those that destroyed people's properties, that justice will be found. That it will be a terror to them. That people don't do those kind of things anymore. Isaiah 1 and verse 17 says, Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. Isaiah 13 verse 18 says, Therefore the Lord waits to be gracious to you, and therefore he exalts himself to show mercy to you. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all those who wait for him. He's a God of justice, and he says, Blessed are all those who wait for him. This widow waited for 30 years in this movie, Ghost of Mississippi. He says, even as a judge took up, as a prosecutor took up the case, they knew he was fighting for the widow. Somebody who nobody can speak up for. Amos 5 and verse 24 says, But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. So our prayer today, the Bible talks a lot about justice. In the New Testament, Luke chapter 11 verse 42, Jesus speaking says, But woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and every herb, and neglect justice and the love of God. This you ought to have done without neglecting the others. Even as we give our tithes, as we give our offerings, it says, but do not neglect justice. So the Bible talks a lot about justice. God is a God, is a just God, is a God of justice. And so what happens when it seems that God is silent in the midst of all the injustices? What happens when it seems that God is silent in the midst of all the injustices? Sometimes you wonder, what about you? One of my values is justice. So when I see the unfairness, I feel bad. I was almost going to the streets on Wednesday. I feel bad. but you see, what happens when you feel and you see things are not happening? And sometimes we even prayed. We prayed that morning. Hey, how many of you are in the Wednesday prayer, early prayer morning? We prayed. Yet some of these things are still happening. And it seems like God is silent. In fact, when I see the CS for Interior speaking, and I'm thinking, what are you saying? When it looks like some people are still arrogant and are just boasting about how, we shall continue. Or some people are not speaking at all. And you're wondering, God, where are you in the midst of all these things? How many of you have wondered like me? Where is God in the midst of all this that is happening? And we are praying and we are pressing Him. And so I want us to turn our hearts to the book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk. Those of you who come from Eastern Ukambani, it's called Baluku. The friend used to call him Baluku. So it's Habakkuk. Some people pronounce it as Habakkuk. But it's a very interesting book. It's a short book, only 3 chapters. I encourage us to go and read all of it this evening. It's a very interesting book. In fact, some people wonder if he was really a prophet. It is among the prophets, but some people wonder if this guy was he really a prophet? Because in this book, he's the only book of among the prophets where he's not speaking to the people. He's not bringing God's word to the people, but instead he's complaining. He has a domain with God. He said, God, why do the wicked prosper? Why are you allowing these things to happen? Yeah, read. If you read from verse 1, Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 2, from verse 2 to verse 4, it says, Oh Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence and you still will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity? And why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. Verse 4 says, So the law is paralyzed, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. So that's the situation where Habakkuk finds himself, maybe like us today. And he's wondering, how come injustices is prevailing around him? How come things are not going as they ought to go? What is happening? In short, he's saying, God, what is happening here? Why are you not acting as you need to act? Why are you not taking charge? We've sung this morning that God is in control. He rules and reigns. But why are these things happening in and around us? I don't know about you. Have you ever, felt that there's a lot of injustice going on around you? Or to you? How many of you have suffered some one injustice or another? How many of you have suffered some injustices? Somebody took off with your money and never paid. Or there was just some illegalities done to you. Something that belonged to you was taken or unjustly. Or you were fired. Some of us have been fired unjustly from your workplace. And you felt a lot of injustice. The inheritance that you had was snatched away from you. There are very many injustices. There are many widows today in court. Cases that have stayed for about 30 years. People have died and people are still fighting and looking for what they felt was justly theirs. And so we're not alone. Habakkuk is in that space also. He's feeling that there's a lot of injustice around us. In fact, at this time, as he's writing, the nation of Israel are under the oppression. In fact, Israel has been taken into captivity by the Assyrian Empire. And now Judah, the southern kingdom, is about to be taken over. The Chaldeans are already ruling. And Habakkuk is wondering, how come these wicked people are ruling over God's people? This sounds, it really sounds, it doesn't sound fair. And so he begins to complain. He makes an observation and he begins a lot of questions in his heart. The book is a record of the prophet's own struggle with the questions of faith. He's struggling. He observes that the leaders in Judah are oppressing the poor. And so he raises a question as to why God allows those that are wicked people to prosper. Sometimes we pray, we think that these people should just fall and die, but you see them healthy and strong and moving on. You're wondering, God, where are you in the midst of all these things? I mean, you are praying for some people in your life to be taken away, but you just see them be prospering instead. Sometimes you think that, these things, God, I'll pray, and this person will be wiped out. And as you're praying, they see them prospering, and things seem to be going well for them. Even when they were sick, if they're healed, and they're out of hospital, and they're back. And you're wondering, your silent prayer was that they will die there in the hospital. But they have come out, they have been discharged, and they have come back to the office, and they're still harassing you. And so Habakkuk is wondering, God, where are you in all these things? In the midst of all these injustices, God, where are you? It looks like God is idly looking at wrong and allowing it to continue happening around him. Those committing atrocities are going out scot-free. The law seems to be paralyzed, and justice never goes. But me, I've been arrested a couple of times for traffic offenses, and I thought I was a good citizen of the country. I followed the policeman. I refused to bribe, but I ended up in cell. I suffered. So I'm thinking, actually, I've bribed and forgotten about these things. And there were even moments there, days I went, that I would think they'll give me a cash bill. I go to, that time we used to be at the city hall there, up there, there was like a court there. So you go there, they tell you to report at 8 o'clock. So you think you report at 8 and go to do your business. But you're there the whole day. Listening to all unnecessary cases. And you're there the whole day. And then a time comes when you can't say anything because you can't even plead your case. So you say, I'm guilty. Even if you are not guilty, you say guilty so that you can quickly get out of that place. And then you go. One time I said guilty. So I thought because I'd given my bail, they would just release me because they have my money. So when I go there, the guy tells me, no, these are two departments. So if you don't have the money, we shall take you to the cell downstairs. I didn't have any money in me. I thought the 5,000 bail and paid was sufficient. In fact, the fine was less than 5,000. And so I'm there, the guy says, the policeman tells me, no, we'll take you down there to the cell. Come on, Apesa. So I look, there's a lady next to me, I asked her, please just give me 5,000. And then I called my wife to send somebody the money. Say, tukitoka nje takupatia. And I found favor, this lady just gave me the 5,000 shillings and I paid my money there. And when we got out, I sorted it out. But you see, I'm feeling this is so unjust. I'm thinking I'm doing good. I've come to the court. They've wasted my whole day. So I'm thinking, which is an easy option? Just bribe and get away with it than to go through all these manenos. So sometimes it seems like you're being punished for doing the right thing. And those that are doing the wrong thing seem to be getting out scot-free. A lot of injustices around us. So Habakkuk is complaining. He's asking the Lord, why is this happening? Why are the wicked Chaldeans, who are actually worse than the wicked Jews, allowed to bring God's judgment upon God's people? And so from verses 5 to 11, God responds. It's a very interesting book. It's a book of answer. Habakkuk questions God, then God answers. Then again he questions God, and then God answers. And the first, in the verses 5 to 11, God responds to Habakkuk's questions. In other words, he answers his prayers. But not in the way that I think Habakkuk expects him to answer those prayers. God tells Habakkuk that he has already begun to answer his request. Could it be that God already is answering our request, but we're not seeing it? In the natural world, all that we are seeing around is still the wickedness and all the bad things happening. But God already has orchestrated a plan of what he is going to do. God is working behind the scenes in ways that we may not understand. Doesn't the Bible say that his ways are not our ways? And his thoughts are not really our thoughts. As high as the heavens are from the earth, so are his ways from our ways, and his thoughts from our thoughts. God can even use the wicked for his own purposes, as he was using the Chaldeans for his purposes, to drive his purpose and for his people. So this brings us to another age-old dilemma that we ourselves are facing in this country, and we normally face many times. Why does evil seem to go unpunished? That's what Habakkuk is really asking. Why does evil seem to go unpunished? Why does it seem that the wicked are prospering? Yet we think that it's us who are righteous who should prosper. But the wicked seem to be prospering. I think David, the writer of the psalmist in Psalm 73, had the same thing. A very interesting psalm. You can read it and go at home. David says, my feet had almost slipped. Because he thinks and he looks around and sees how the wicked are prospering. It's only when he went back to the house of God and he found some sanity, he realized it's not all as I think it is. But he says, my feet had almost slipped. And I know that people even who backslide, there are people who have left the faith because they have felt that God has not answered their prayer in the way that he should have answered their prayer. But they have felt that the suffering and the injustices have prevailed, and it seems like God is not doing anything. In fact, I remember, I think it was that Wednesday morning I was watching, I think it must have been an NTV, where there was a panel. There were panels, and my friend, Reverend Tony Kiama, was also among them. And so one of the people there was saying, no, don't tell us about God. God is not doing anything. And I could tell the agitation in this young man's heart, because they're feeling, God, where are you in the midst of all these things? And then the man of God is telling them, no, there's hope. They say, what hope? It looks like it is hopeless. The situation seems to be bleak. And sometimes we can even despair and become skeptical, because it seems that God is not doing anything. God is not moving as we think that he should. And so God responds finally in Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 4. He says, I will see to it that those who are wicked will be punished. I will see to it that those who are wicked will be punished. But the righteous ones must live by faith. He don't say that they will be punished. He says, I will see to it that they will be punished. But the righteous must live by faith. And so you notice here that God doesn't say how or even when the wicked will be punished. He only assures Habakkuk that the justice will eventually be done. Meanwhile, the just should live by faith. My encouragement to us this morning is, let's live by faith. In the midst of all these things, we don't understand a lot of things. In the midst of it all, let us wait, let us live by faith. I was talking to some people that day, some young people that were telling me, no, Pastor, we can't wait for another 2 years. He said, just hold on, hold your horses. Justice. What if it's not 1 term, it's 2 terms? What will you do? What will you do? So sometimes it seems we may wait longer than we thought we should wait. I want to encourage us here this morning that the grindstones of God, though they grind slowly, they grind exceedingly small. It may take time. It may look like this for this widow, 30 years, but she finally got her justice. Sometimes it will take long. I remember many years ago, I was living in a house. I didn't even know the history of the house. We just walked around and we saw this house that was run down, and we said, probably this is a good house to take. We had been given notice where we were staying. So as I see some people outside there, I knock the gate, they open, and they come in. And I think they're not even decided whether they're going to rent the house or not. So I'm asking them, is this house up for rent? And they're looking at me, I could tell they're not yet decided whether they should give it out for rent or not. And so they asked us, okay, you just look at it and see. So we enter the house, we look at the house, and compared to where we were living, this looked like, it looked very bad. It was bad. But as I looked at the house, I saw there's potential in this house. If I can save some money here, this house can be a beautiful house. So I convinced Grace, let's take this house. So we go, and the rent they're charging us is next to nothing. So I say, for the size of the house, they say, we're taking it. I just told them, we're taking it. And then I talked to the accountant. At that time I was working as a church staff. I talked to the accountant and they said, yeah, just give me my 3 months rent in advance. I'll go. I want to. So we went and spruce up the house. We painted the house. We made it beautiful, and got into this wonderful, wonderful house. It was half acre land next to Safari Park. We were seeing Safari Park. Beautiful, beautiful house. But my dad came to visit us that time, and he said, hey, you're living like a minister. So we got a big house for a rent that was next to nothing. That's why I loved it. So we began to stay there. But little did we know the history behind that house. So as we get here, as we gather in and settle in that house, terror, we are visited by terror. So one night, we hear stones hitting our bedroom window. Like those stones here, where stones rain from somewhere. Yeah, because the house was by itself, so we wonder where the stones are coming from. And we panicked and we called, and called one of our friends who was in touch with the DCI, and within a few minutes the police are around that place, the plainclothes policemen with guns quickly came and to the rescue, and they walk around, they check, there's nothing. So they tell us, okay, you just go back to sleep, in case of anything, just call us. I couldn't even sleep. So we just cashed that night and we continued staying. So a couple of months later, again, same thing happens. And now this time, there's panic, and Grace is telling me, no, we need to move out of this house. We're getting out of this house. In fact, apart from that, our things used to be stolen outside. We during the day, not at night. Sometimes and not big things. Maybe a water pipe washing my car was stolen. A few things outside the house were being stolen. And there used to be a lady, because behind us was an empty plot, and this lady used to plant maize there. So she would come. Apparently, she's the one who was spying on us. So she would come and do things. Now, I'm coming to learn the stories later. That this lady is an aunt to the young ladies who had rented us the house. These girls, their parents built this house about like 10, 11 years prior to the time we're coming in. But both parents died when they were still young. And so the uncle and the auntie had taken over that house on the father's side. And so when these girls now of age, they wanted to claim back their property. This is their parents' property. And so they finally managed to get out the person who was staying there. Well, actually, the uncle and auntie were staying there because they were the ones who had run down the house. So when they are chucked out, they decide to see what they can do. In fact, what I was paying as rent was going to pay the school fees of the younger sister, of the lady now who was renting for me the house. The young girls, I think they were in the early 20s then. So my landlady was in the early 20s. And so I was paying rent to. And so, because I now knew the story, the reason as to why. So one time I'm praying in the morning, and Grace is now fed up. She said, we need to move out. And as I pray, I hear God tell me that, He is the father to the fatherless. And I didn't know, but God dropped me in to fight for these girls. So I felt a conviction that we should not move. We will stay. In the midst of all that is happening, we will stay. And so I tell Grace, we will not move. We will stay here. And so we stay. In fact, that time, Grace is heavily pregnant with Shekinah. So the day Shekinah is being born and I take Grace to the hospital, that night again I'm attacked. And the stones used to be thrown in our bedroom window, our master bedroom, where we sleep. That's where the stones will be thrown. And they throw stones, and I didn't even tell Grace. I just clear the place, and Grace comes back with Shekinah as a little baby. A few weeks later, we get a eviction notice, a letter from a lawyer. I take the letter, I look at it, it doesn't look authentic. So I call the lady, I tell her, hey, somebody has given us a letter here. So they take it to their lawyers, they say that's fake. You know it, you just continue staying there. So we continue staying there. So now I've known this mama, the auntie to the girls, who was actually organizing this guy who was throwing stones at our window. Now I even discovered, that's why I was not fearful now. So they just throw the stones and I just ignore. So I meet her and I tell her, so I just said, let me just confront her and talk to her. And I told her, Mama, what people are doing is not right. This house belongs to these girls. It's their inheritance. And we're not going to move out. What you're doing is not right. And we talk, and I leave, and then she leaves me. Unbeknown to me, I think 2 weeks later, the husband, somewhere in Joro, I don't know what happens. He collapses and dies. Just out of the blue. The lady becomes hospitalized. Long story short, these girls had their property, and happened to have been used by God to help them retain their property. But God is a God of justice. Eventually, the property ended up in their hands. And I think later on, they told me they'd done all the things, all the transfers and everything. And the house was now rightly theirs. After waiting for years, the land, their inheritance almost being taken away from them. And we found ourselves in that mix, and that's how God uses us to help these girls get their property. What am I saying? It may take long. However long it takes, God is a God of justice. And one day, things will turn around. Things will come as we expect them to be. God will indeed fight for us. So Habakkuk is in this space and is wondering. The Lord is saying the just should live by faith. God makes all things beautiful in His time. He knows how and He knows what will happen. In fact, in Habakkuk 2 and verse 3 says, God tells Habakkuk, the vision is for an appointed time. God's timing is always the perfect. Let's wait for it. When the judgment is coming upon Judah, it will come soon. The punishment of the Babylonians will not be fulfilled. The punishment for Judah, the nation of Israel, came very soon. They were taken into captivity. And the people that were oppressing them ruled over them. Now they were taken into captivity in 586 BC. But it was not until almost 35 years later that the Babylonian Empire came crashing down. The people who had taken them into captivity, the people that God had used to punish them, eventually 35 years later is when justice seems to have been done. So it may take longer than we think. But I want to assure us this morning that God is not asleep. He sees and He hears the cries. Yesterday in our Explore group, we were discussing about the children of Israel. For 400 years, they lived in Egypt. And when a Pharaoh that did not know Joseph came into power, these guys suffered. And it took years. They suffered for many years. But in the book of Exodus, it says that God says, I've seen your cry. I've heard your cries. I've seen your affliction. And my heart is moved because of what is happening to you. And God then decides to deliver his people. And so it will come to pass. God will act. How and when, we may not know. But eventually that will happen. What happened to the dictators of old? There were days, some of you maybe were not born, but in our neighboring country there was a guy called Idi Amin, who even killed Christians, and he was a terror. But where is he today? There's not even a trace of his generation in Uganda. In fact, he had to take off to Saudi Arabia and lived and died a poor man. I think the last I heard, he died as a waiter in somewhere in Saudi Arabia. A guy who was a president, a guy who declared himself the conqueror of the British Empire. Where are the people? Where are the Mobutus Sekos and the Bokasas and all these people? They're all gone. Those that oppress, those that are in leadership, those that think that they can do things and escape with it, the day will come. We forget, even the Babylonians and all these Chaldees, they forgot that it is God who had allowed them to punish the nation of Israel. It was not out of their own effort. That's why one of the kings of Babylon, one day woke up and they was writing in the wall, kingdom is coming to an end. So these things will come to an end. God is on the throne. He knows what he is doing. I think that should be our confidence in the midst of all that is happening around us, that God is in control. And that's why it takes us back to Habakkuk 2 and verse 4. Meanwhile, the just shall live by faith. That kind of faith that Habakkuk describes here is a continuing trust in God and clinging to God's promises, even in the darkest days, like the ones we find ourselves in as a nation. God is sovereign over all creation. He is the one who is in control. In fact, that's why in verse 19 he says, hush, keep quiet. God is in his holy temple. God is in control. So as we find ourselves complaining, in the midst of all those complaining, sometimes we just need to hush and know that God is in control. It looks helpless. We feel helpless. We are bound. We have to wait for 2 years. We don't even know what will happen then. And so sometimes it can look so frustrating. But my encouragement to us this morning is that God is on his throne. Let us hush. Let us just keep quiet and know God is in control. He is progressively doing something. So relax and know that he is in charge. He is in control. So Habakkuk concludes and says, but the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. So do we stop praying for this situation? No. Let's continue praying. Let's continue asking and seeking the Lord that he may demonstrate his power. That even in the midst of his wrath, because I believe that God's heart is weeping for our nation. When these things are happening, God is not happy. They are touching the very heart of God. But our prayer should also be that in wrath, God will remember mercy. Be merciful to us. We have done wickedly before him. We have done wrong things as a people. We have elected the wrong people. We have been bribed. Because the leadership that you're complaining about, who elected them? It's us. They didn't put themselves there. It's you and I who put them in office. Including your local MC and MP. You see, you voted for them. These people who have abandoned us now in our hour of need. But it's us who voted for them. My prayer is that next time we shall be wiser. But in wrath, may God remember mercy. May he be merciful to us. As he judges us, as he judges this nation, may he remember mercy. In wrath, Lord, as Habakkuk says in chapter 3 verse 2, in wrath, O Lord, remember mercy. O Lord, forgive us. You've heard the report of you and how you work, O Lord. Do I fear? In the midst of the years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make known. In wrath, he says in Habakkuk 3 verse 2, remember mercy. So yes, we will continue praying. We will continue pressing in. We will continue praying that justice will prevail. We will continue praying that God's hand will be seen.